Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Conversations with Sharika. My name is Sharika Swaby. I am the Mind Reset Strategist. I'm a life coach and mentor, author, and speaker, and the host of this show. And today I have an amazing guest for you. Her name is Melisa Keenan. And she is, let me just read it so I get it properly. She's an international feminine intimacy coach, visionary, and keynote speaker. And she's also a published author. And the name of her book is Letters to the Younger Self, if I'm not getting that incorrect. And she helps women embody intimacy and lead with their feminine in both business and marriage, right? So, Melissa, thank you so much for taking the time to be here with me today. It's an absolute honor and pleasure to have you.
Thank you so much for having me, Sharika.
I love it. I love it. I love it. So let's get right into it because I know you don't have a lot of time. So my first question for you is, we want to get clear on what does a feminine intimacy coach do?
Yes, so I serve kind of as a confidant to my clients. It's the work that we do is really, inner work that then has a ripple effect to their tangible life, to their business, to their relationships. But it's a lot about going in and really identifying like what our heart is saying, what desires we have, what emotions are present that we have avoided, and things. And because I believe that it's what our heart speaks to us is actually the blueprint to our most fulfilled and impactful life.
Right, right. Okay, that sounds good. I like that. Always everything begins with you. Everything is all the answers are on the inside. So I do love that. So up to about 3 years ago, 3 to 4 years ago, you were a stay at home mom and now you're a millionaire. You have to share with us what got you from that point to this point.
Okay, well, I have to confess I'm not a millionaire yet, but it's going to happen this year.
I love that. That's super awesome. Speaking it into existence. Sure, why not?
So I think I've been through a lot of iterations of myself throughout my life, which in our modern day culture and society, I think we sort of shun the idea of shape shifting. But really, it is our feminine nature to change and evolve. Our bodies are always changing and evolving, and so I think for me, there's always been a strong sense of identifying who I am.
Mhm.
And I do that by throwing myself into something and then feeling how it feels.
Right.
And so it took me many different versions of myself to get to a place where I felt like, oh, I think I was meant to do this.
Mm.
Being a mother felt that way, but being a stay at home mom did not feel that way. And being a stay at home mom for me was you know, there was a lot of reasons that went into that decision. But I think in a lot of ways, it was kind of a rebellion against even the feminist shoulds and boxes that I felt like I would only be worthy if I had a career, that kind of thing, right? So it was really important to me to find who is Melissa, even if she's not attached to a career or some big fancy title where the rest of the world says, "Oh, now you have value." And then in that place, I still felt that there was a deep longing, like I wasn't very fulfilled in many of those different roles and things that you have to do as a stay at home mom.
Right.
And I felt really guilty about that. Actually, I really thought that I was supposed to love all of that.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
grateful that I listened to that because I think there was clearly something in me that was saying, you have some gifts that need to be shared with the world at large. And
Right.
so yeah, so here I am today. Lots of pain and heartache that led to the transformations and growth and healing that have me to where I am today. But I'm so grateful for all of it.
Yeah, I understand that completely. Now, so that our viewers can understand you a little bit, I see in your book that you were raised by relatives. So, just to backtrack a little bit, what was happening in your childhood between your mom and your dad and you that led to you not being with well, your dad later passed away, my condolences. What led to you not being with your mom? What was happening in that space?
So my parents, let's see, I was about 6 or 7, I think, when my mom came home with a headache one day, and her headache never went away,
Wow.
pretty much ever. It's still like they ended up diagnosing her with fibromyalgia, and she ended up coming home from her nursing career and going on disability and things. But from that, there was a lot of decisions that she made that put her in a position to not really be fit to take care of a child. And so as she got sick and these things developed, she and my dad's relationship started to crumble, and my dad actually ultimately had an affair and filed for divorce. And you would think that I would have empathized more with my mom, but because of her life circumstances before her marriage, she had a really tragic childhood that she, I think, had tried so hard to pretend wasn't there, to pretend that all that wasn't a part of her,
Hmm.
that it came out anyway. And so she became, violent and very unstable. And then I was going through hell, right? I was just this little baby, and here's my whole family literally blowing up, and everybody's got issues and disability. And add to that, that my dad was a drug addict, my mom became a prescription drug addict. Like, then there's an affair. Like, I was going through the ringer, and so I was no like little angel easy child either. And so my mom and I had a lot of different really scary experiences together that ultimately led to her losing custody of me when I was about 11. And then it was probably like 2 months after my dad won custody of me that he was diagnosed with terminal cancer and
Wow.
given 3 months to live. And so then it was like, oh, now what do we do with Melissa? I was the only child. And my aunt stepped in and said, I would like to take Melissa. I didn't really want to go with my aunt. I wanted to be with my mom because she was familiar, even though I literally sat there in court like I wanted to be away from her because it was scary. But
Hmm.
I wanted to be with her because it was familiar. It was so conflicting. And so I moved in with my aunt and uncle, they lived an hour away from where I originally lived until age 12, in just a slightly larger town in the middle of Nevada.
Wow. That's what were some of what kind of effect did that have on you? Because at 10, 11 years old, your perception is somewhat heightened. You're aware of what's going on. You can see all the trauma, all the pain, and then your dad passing away. I know that had to have some effect on you. So how did you come back from that? What was that like?
um, there were a few things that really carried me. It was so, so hard. I have tears because I always have a lot of compassion for my younger self, for like her endurance through everything that she endured, that she went through and overcame. But there were some things that carried me. My dad and I had gotten baptized in an Assemblies of God Christian church. Um, together probably when I was 11. It was probably within the year of him being diagnosed and then dying of cancer. We were baptized together because he had gone to a drug rehab and got like off drugs as much as possible, as far as I know. Right, I was a kid, I don't know, but
Yeah.
really, really learned the value of Christianity. Like all of our family is Christian, and I mean, I was preached at from the moment I could like open my eyes, like taught from the Bible by my grandparents and stuff. But my dad didn't really see the value, and I think he just felt like a lot of people were always trying to tell him who he could be and who he wasn't supposed to be, and so he really resisted against that, which I now have a lot of respect for him, for wanting to know who he was, right, and wanting to be who he was, but he went about it in crazy ways. My dad was crazy. So anyway, he got to this point where it was like it was just me and him against the world, and he was like, and I, he wanted to win custody. He wanted to give me the stability that he knew I deserved, and so he went to drug rehab, and then we got baptized together and stuff. So on his deathbed, he made my aunt and uncle promise to take me to church, and I'm just so grateful. I don't even belong to that church anymore, that faith. I belong to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints now, but that carried me so much because in my home with my aunt and uncle, there wasn't a lot of space for the big feelings that I was feeling.
Mm-hmm.
I would go to church on Sundays, and every Sunday the pastor would make what they called an altar call, where he would invite anyone who felt like they
Right.
needed prayer to come
Mm-hmm.
to the front of the church and pray. And me at 12 years old would go up almost every single Sunday. And it was the only place I felt like I could just be me, I would go up there and there were these stairs up there, and I would try to find a place where no one would see me. I just didn't want to be, because you have to go in front of the whole church. Like,
I know. Have been there.
yeah. And I would like, okay, where's the like crack that I can go hide in?
Mm-hmm.
I think that was really special too, was at that particular church, I had some cousins, older, much older than me, like probably in their 50s, that also belonged to that congregation. And
Mm-hmm.
so often they would come over and like pray with me and stuff. And I usually wouldn't say anything because I didn't feel safe to tell people how I
Right.
really felt. Like I was suicidal for years. I just wanted to leave. I felt like this is more pain than I could possibly bear.
Yeah.
But to have them there, and I felt like God saw me and knew me and could handle all my big emotions.
Mm-hmm.
That was so huge, and it ties in every day to the work that I do, because I found that God, who I view as masculine, my heavenly Father, and my Savior Jesus Christ, who I also believe is male, I could rely on them. I could depend on them, and I could rest in them. And that allowed me to be in my feminine, be in my emotions, and just be with exactly as I was. And that reinforced for me that there was spaces and places in the world where I could just rest, where I didn't have to be in my masculine and be on and in control and in charge and putting my best foot forward at every moment, right? So that was so huge for me.
Wow. I'm glad you had that because maybe we wouldn't be having this conversation today. So I'm grateful for that. Um, tell us a little bit about that pickup truck experience from your book.
The pickup truck experience. So I hitchhiked at age 12. Um, it was terrifying, but it was also a miracle.
Where were you going?
So my mom and I were court appointed to go every week to a therapist
Mm-hmm.
in the neighboring town. So
Right.
actually, we need to give a little context here. What happened was I lived with my aunt and uncle for a year. And then I did a trial period over a summer with my mom. And the
Mm-hmm.
thing was, if I could live with her for 6 weeks and it all went well, then I could move back in with my mom.
Wow.
That didn't happen. It ended absolutely horribly, like maybe worst case scenario almost.
Mm-hmm.
So one of these days, each week we were supposed to go see a therapist back in Fallon, back in the neighboring town where my aunt and uncle lived.
Mm-hmm.
And we were driving there, and I had been running around wild all over the streets of Hawthorne because my mom really wasn't doing very well. And a lot of the time she was like passed out on the couch. And so I was left to kind of like do whatever I wanted. So I was drinking, I was talking to my mom about marijuana and all kinds of like stuff that I was getting involved in. And my mom was so triggered, like so triggered. You know, hindsight's 2020, right? But she just became belligerent, and it was terrifying. And so we had this massive fight on the drive and stuff. Eventually she pulled over, and there was a very violent exchange where I ended up running, and what to me felt like I was fleeing for my life,
Right.
and hiding in the desert until she left. um,
Wow.
and uh, while I was fleeing, I was also trying to slit my wrists with
Mm-hmm.
a beer bottle that I had found, which doesn't make any sense, right? Like, I guess it does, like, from an adult perspective. I just wanted to get away from the pain in whatever way possible. So I was trying to, preserve my life by running away from my mom, but I was also trying to take my life because the pain was so intense.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I got behind, I ran about the length of a football field, and I got behind some mountains there. I just ended up collapsing to the ground and saying a prayer. And I felt really guilty. I had been raised believing that if you committed suicide, you were going to hell. I
Mm-hmm.
don't believe that anymore. Like, that doesn't really align with the God that I have a relationship with. But at the time, that's what I had been taught, and I felt so
Right.
guilty. And so
Mm-hmm.
I was saying, I'm so sorry to God. Um and then I just passed out right there in the middle of the desert. And when I woke back up again, the the wounds that I had created on my wrists were smaller than they were when I went to sleep. And I know that was a miracle. There was all these miracles that just happened for me, at this tender age of 12, that have been strengths that I have drawn on again and again. So when I saw that my wounds had dried up, I knew that was God's way of saying there is a purpose for your life, and you are
Right.
not meant to die right now, and your life isn't always going to be this bad. That's what I felt from that. And
Yeah.
so I got up and I started marching back to the highway, praying that my mom wouldn't see me and that I wouldn't be picked up by any assholes. That's
Right.
literally what this prayer was at age
I saw that.
I always say Heavenly Father can handle all our F words. Like, we have to be so proper and whatever, but really.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But that's a good prayer. That's a good prayer because it could have happened.
Exactly. So the next miracle that happened, I was walking along and I was wearing bright blue in the middle of the Nevada desert. And I was walking and I watched my mom drive by. And I was like frozen in fear, but she
Wow.
didn't even see me. And I know that was a miracle. And so then I kept walking towards the highway, thinking I knew I couldn't walk all the way back to my aunt and uncle's house.
Mm-hmm.
It is about another 25-minute drive. So it would have taken
Yeah.
me, the whole day. And it was the middle of summer. It was probably like
Hot.
102 degrees. Like, I had no water. I had no resource. I didn't even have a purse. We didn't have cell phones at this time. Like, it was dire. And so
Right.
I knew someone was going to come. I just knew, I don't know how I knew someone was going to come and help me and pick me up. And
Yeah.
so I remember a couple cars passed, and then this one pickup truck passed me going the other direction. They were not going the direction that I needed to go. They flipped a U, pulled up beside me, and right away, there's three big Indian women, and the one rolls her window down, and the mom starts lecturing me. What are you doing out here? It's not safe. And oddly enough, that came as a huge comfort to me. I was like, oh, this is my person.
Somebody who cares.
Someone who cares, exactly. And
Somebody
so we
who cares.
discussed, I was trying to hide my arms. I didn't want them to see the blood and everything. And they said, where are you going? And I asked for a ride, and they said, well, we would love to give you a ride. We don't have any space in our cab, but you can lay down in the bed of the pickup truck.
Wow.
And so they took me all the way back to my aunt and uncle's home. And this was a miracle, I mean, in and of itself. But after this, we employed all of our family in this area. So it was around the Schurz Reservation, which is a very small Native American reservation where everyone knows everyone. And we employed all our resources that we could in trying to find these women, because I didn't even think to ask their names, right? Like I
Wow.
was just traumatized and 12 and,
Mm-hmm.
and we wanted to thank them. My aunt and uncle wanted to give them some money and stuff. And we could never find them. No one even recognized the description of the vehicle or anything. So my ancestors always said that wasn't a truck full of angels. Those were angels. And I believe it. I believe it.
It's possible that they were. But that's truly, truly amazing though. That's like they weren't going your direction and they took you up, they cared. Immediately you got the comfort that you needed just the way they spoke to you and approached you. And so that's amazing. That's my heart has been touched this evening. Thank you so much for sharing and for being open. That was truly beautiful. But your arm, it got the cut that you hadn't made, it got smaller so that you wouldn't bleed to death.
Yep,
That's a lot of miracles in one day.
it is. I recently shared this story with my son, my
Mhm.
10-year-old son. And I still have a tiny scar on both wrists, actually, just a teeny tiny one, that I think is a gift. I think they were left there as a reminder.
Yeah.
And shared this with my 10-year-old son. For some reason, he'd been, curious about suicide and what is this? And friends have been using this word and what does this mean and everything, and I just felt like I was supposed to share
Right.
a story with him. And and then showed him the scars on my wrist, and it was just so sweet because he was like, children always easily have faith, but his faith is solidified now. He was like, Mom, this is what you went through. And then we played a card game afterwards, and like every 10 minutes or so he'd say something else about the story. It was like he was sitting there like,
Thinking about it.
yeah. And then later that evening he goes, is this one of those stories that's supposed to stay in the family circle? Like, but I told him, listen, if you ever feel like sharing this story would help someone, then you share it. And he said, okay.
Wow. Those young kids, they can be so compassionate. They have so much empathy. I mean, they're awesome. I have two. I have a 13-year-old girl and a 6-year-old boy. So I get it.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Yeah. But at what point, though, do you think your healing began?
I think that's such a funny question, because isn't it just a layer by layer process? Um,
Hmm.
I it's so hard to say. It's funny because when I was 18, I thought I was healed. I thought all the trauma is behind me and I'm over it, right?
Hmm.
And then I got married and it was like holy trigger central. Because
Mm-hmm.
all of a sudden I made commitments with my heart with this man, and then we had a baby, and all of a sudden my heart's outside of me running around in this little baby, and like I was depressed, and I was couldn't understand any of the feelings I was feeling. It was
Wow.
literally all the trauma just like came right back.
Back.
But it's funny because I've talked to people who knew me in high school, and they're like, we had no idea how like unhappy you were and how you really felt, because I kept it all in. I kept a journal, and it was full of all this darkness and F words and things, right? And prayers and confusion and stuff, and cried myself to sleep at night. And then on the outside, I was the cheerleading captain and the student body president and the blah blah
Wow.
blah, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
and because I found survival in those things. I found
I kept
love
you
and
in it.
acceptance and and so it's interesting because then I started going to a therapist. I thought it was postpartum depression. I started going to a therapist, like 21 years old or something, and I also started going to the family support group 12-step addiction recovery program because of my family having all this addiction and things.
Mm-hmm.
And the progress felt so slow. And there I realized, oh, I had formed my own addictions and things that I didn't even realize as numbing and coping techniques.
Right.
And then in the middle of that process, I found out that my husband had a secret addiction that he had never shared with me. We were 5 years into marriage, and I didn't know. And here I'm thinking, like, what the heck? Like, can we catch a break here? Like, literally, that's how I felt about my life, just like such
Yeah.
a victim.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Um, and then when my husband and I separated, about 8 months after he shared his addiction with me, that I would say is when I really got very serious about my own. Up to that point, it was like I was still blaming other people. I was still like kind of like with my hand out to God, kind of like, okay, like I've done my work, like where's the blessings? Hand them over. And when my I asked my husband to move out, and we had three little babies, and it was my low of lows. I didn't know how I was going to provide for them. I didn't know if I was giving my husband permission to go move in with some girlfriend or something. I didn't know the extent of like what he was going through. I just knew he needed to move out.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a rock bottom, and it was finally that wake up call that said, I will do whatever it takes to create my own happiness, because I know I was not put here on this planet to suffer like this. And
Yeah.
we actually named our third daughter Daily Abundance for that very reason. So she, like, her name is just a little promise, a little reminder of the promises. And boy, Sharika, I love this interview because people don't let me go this deep, and I love to go this deep. So here I am, crying and just with all the things that.
My show is, I wanted this show because I want to see people, I want to see where they're coming from, and I want to see their healing process, and I want to share that with others so that others can know that they can heal too. They don't have to stay stuck. They don't have to stay in pain. So if that's what it takes to get it out there, I'm down. I don't have no problem at all. It's just the only thing we don't have is time, because you have to go in a few minutes.
Yes.
That's the only factor, but I don't mind you going deep at all. But let's flip it up a little before you have to run. Hold on. Unfortunately, I live close to the road, and they play music in their vehicles and all kinds of things. So, yeah. So, but in your book, you spoke about facing your shadow. Could you tell us what exactly that means, and what is a shadow?
Well, I believe we all have a light side and a shadow side, right? It's like our the parts of us that are shiny and beautiful and everyone loves, and then there's the parts of us that are scary and sad and angry that nobody wants to see and that we don't like to see in ourselves. And actually, both are divine. Um, so my mom is actually a really big gift in this. I feel like my mom, if my mom were a symbol of something or a reminder of something, she would be that reminder that, like, hey, you have a shadow and it's divine too. She doesn't do that consciously. She just does it by being. Um, and so that's what I mean when I refer to our shadow. It's the parts of us that we want to lock away and pretend don't exist. But being able to incorporate those parts of us into our lives actually is what makes people fall in love with us. It's what makes people it's where we use our mess and turn it into our message. It's like it's the richness in us. And when we find that wholeness within, people feel that radiates way more than a phony, shiny self, right? Um, so yeah, does that help answer the question about what your shadow is?
It does. It does. You did answer that. So, okay. So I know that acceptance is a big problem for most of us, right? We find it hard to accept the parts of us that the world tells us is not perfect, right? It's this and it's that and it's that. So how does one face that shadow side of themselves?
Hmm. It's not very hard. The thing is it's there whether we want to see it or not, right? It's simply a matter of allowing what is. And so, one of the things I teach my clients at a real basic level is this idea of discomfort as an alarm. That our discomfort is really like a sacred bell. So if something happened, you're going throughout your day, and all of a sudden you feel discomfort, right? You don't even necessarily know what it is that you feel yet. You just know it doesn't feel good. That's actually our body's way of asking us to pause and pay attention and get present to what it is that we're feeling. And the more we practice that, the more we're able to identify, like, oh, I think I know what emotion that is. Like, I'm actually really afraid. I'm afraid that this isn't going to turn out the way I want it to, or I'm actually grieving, you know, something that's changed in my life or whatever. And then we're also able to feel it in our body. That's another aspect, is that our body actually will speak to us, right? It's like when you say things like, I had a pit in my stomach. That's literally happening. You feel a pit in your stomach. And so if we take time to actually incorporate our body and listen to our body, it is a gift to us. And it's not, a lot of people talk about feeling feelings, and that's important, but it's not the end all be all. Our feelings are actually more of like a roadmap that are pointing us towards what we deeply value. And so if we do this work of going and kind of wading through our shadow, it points us to something in our life that's missing, that's super important to us, something we deeply value or something we deeply desire. And so doing this work is great because it actually leads us then to the blueprint for creating the most fulfilled life. And that's unique to each of us, right? Like, my desires and my values are different than your desires and your values. And my deeply fulfilled life will look completely different than your deeply fulfilled life. Neither one is good or bad or right or wrong. They're just different. And I think we are totally backwards in the world right now around that, right? Like, we see, you know, I don't know, some examples, Oprah Winfrey, right? It's like, oh, she must have the perfect life, or whoever our idol is, they must have the perfect life. But actually, the perfect life for us is found right here in us. And if we don't do that work, you know, lots of people, we hear this all the time, right? Like, oh, I got my dream job, and all of a sudden I realized that wasn't what I really wanted. Or I got this, you know, I had the husband and the kids and the picket fence, and I realized it's not really what I wanted. So it behooves us to do this work.
Yeah, that is amazing, and a lot there's no fulfillment in the things that we think we wanted. When we got them, we still feel empty. So yeah, definitely. All right, so we have a little bit of time left, and explain to people who will see this at some point in the future what is meant by the feminine energy and how to embrace that. Now, I'm trying to get as much of my other questions in here as possible. So, um, explain what is feminine energy. When people hear divine feminine, it's a word that has been going around a lot these days. Not just divine feminine, but feminine. Then I have another major question to ask you. A matter of fact, let me tie them into both, into two, right? So there is that, and then there is the rise of feminism, right? With women feeling like the world should be in their hands or something to that effect. I'm not quite sure. I don't get it really. But what I want to know what your views is, what your views are on that, and yeah, and why. So the question is, what's the divine feminine? What's your perspective on feminism and why you have that perspective?
Mhm. I used to think that divine feminine and feminine energy and feminism or being a feminist were all very different. I actually don't think they are. I think that the different ways that we all are expressing them is what has us experiencing so much confusion. Um, but really, we're all seeking the same things, right?
True.
All women everywhere want to feel free, and we want to be fully self expressed, and we
Mhm.
want to experience deep fulfillment in our lives. And, um, and so we're all in pursuit of that in different ways. When I talk about feminine energy, that actually refers to something very different. It's an energy like yin, and masculine energy is yang. And so it's a polarity, actually, that these principles have existed since, thousands of years. They've identified. It's just kind of these polar opposites. There's a polarity, there's a charge. And so in areas where we show up in masculine or yang energy, there will always be something around us that's matching in yin energy and vice versa. What happens in our society and why this matters so much and how it then ends up playing into this whole conversation around feminism and all these things is that our society right now heralds masculine or yang energy. So we see a lot of women who are always leading with this go-getter, focused, driven, achievement-oriented mentality, and kind of like, I have to be big and strong and show that I'm bigger and stronger. And it makes sense, right? Because our ancestors were so disempowered and subject to all manner of unright things, right? So it's important that we have these conversations around masculine and feminine energy, though, because when we only live from our masculine energy, we feel very out of balance. That's true for men and women, actually. Men and women have a blend of these. I believe that women feel more in tune with their natural rhythms and the sense of who they really are when they access more of that feminine or yin energy. And I believe men feel more in alignment with themselves when they access more of that masculine or yang energy, but not all. Like anyone who's in all one or the other typically falls into like what we call toxic feminine or toxic masculine. It's important that we understand what feminine energy is because it brings a sense of balance back to us. And it invites us to look at parts of ourselves that, because of the way society is right now, we didn't even necessarily know were a part of us. But it doesn't have anything to do with things like nails or pink or eyelashes or Botox or sex appeal or any of that stuff. It's or vacuuming and taking care of the children. There's so many misunderstandings around what this actually is. And I think it really is important for each of us to do some study around that, simply to lead us to a deeper understanding of our true selves.
I definitely want you back on this show. I don't know if you can find the time to come because I too believe that that's a topic that needs to be discussed because I'm all for women being strong, but at the same time what I see happening is women getting strong and trampling on men, or creating a system that's going to trample on men, and then we're going to have strong women, but where are we going to get the good men from? So there's going to be some kind of unbalance. So I think that this is a conversation that we definitely need to talk about, but seeing that we don't have the time, let me just ask you two final things. What impact do you want to make on the world?
I want women everywhere to access their true divinity.
Mm, okay, cool. And if you were able to be at your own funeral, what would you like to be said about you?
Well, what a deep question. Wow. Oh, I think I would want people to two things. I would really like, I would be in my spirit self being like, yes, is that they said that they felt that I really cared and how that mattered in their life or helped them in
Mhm.
some way. And that they also felt very capable. Like, because of the experiences that they had with me, they felt more powerful in themselves. Um, Not dependent on me, like they could go on and just carry what they gained from our interaction.
Beautiful, beautiful. And final question: how what are your daily practices, or some of your daily practices that help you to ensure that you stay in that powerful feminine place and don't get too masculine, so to speak?
I don't sit around and think about that, because thinking about, am I being feminine or am I being masculine, is masculine. It's all in our head.
Right.
Instead, some of the things that I do is I seek to follow my desires and follow my pleasure and say yes to the things that excite me.
Sweet. Awesome. I love that. Well, Melissa, I must say, this was quick and really, really enjoyable. I loved it. Thank you for being open, and I love your spirit. You're so calm and relaxed and zen, and I like that. So, thank you so much. And if you ever feel like you want to have that discussion with me, I am open, and I really want to talk to people about this thing that's happening with men and women. And so I think that's a conversation that needs to be had. But thank you once more for being here. It was a pleasure to have you. And I look forward to speaking with you again in the future. Thank you. I know you have to go. So,
Thank you so much, Sharika. I've loved this. Absolutely. And, people want to have more conversation around masculine, feminine, and stuff like this. You can go search up my name. You can find my website and my Facebook and that sort of thing. I'm always talking about this stuff.
awesome. Awesome. All right. Thank you so much for your time. And you are welcome. It was a pleasure. Enjoy the rest of your day. Bye. Okay. Stop that.